SNHell, a look back at Saturday Night Live with your hosts, Matt and Keith. Brought to you by Lion's Den Audio Theater. Like and subscribe to Lion's Den Audio Theater for more Lion's Den goodness. And here are your hosts, Keith and Matt.
Saturday Night Live, Season 3, Episode 5, starring Ray Charles, originally aired on November 12th, 1977. Hello, my name is Keith. Welcome to SNHell. With me, as always, my good buddy Matt. Hello, Matt.
Happy Saturday. Hello to the thousands.
Yes, happy Saturday, my friend. Joining us again for the second time this season. Last with us, Madeline Kahn. I think it was Madeline Kahn. It's Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Happy Saturday.
So, tonight we are looking at musical guest and host Ray Charles. Ray Charles, rock and roll R&B legend. If you don't know who Ray Charles is, there's a heck of a movie starring Jamie Foxx and many albums over the years. Had a tremendous career that spanned forever. And if you grew up in the 80s like I did, Ray Charles was everywhere.
Much to his chagrin, I'm sure, I associate Ray Charles with Diet Pepsi.
You got the right one, baby. Uh-huh. I never really appreciated his legacy or his talent till years later. Before you saw this episode, were either of you guys Ray Charles fans?
Yeah, I grew up with Ray Charles, on in the background all the time. I think at the point of the 80s that you're talking about, he was just one of those living legends. Not a lot of celebrities, especially musically speaking, were probably still kicking that had the kind of pedigree he did. So I think that's part of why he was there, like everywhere all the time. And so, yeah, he's, as long as I can remember being alive, I've known what Ray Charles's voice sounds like. And I've always been a fan,
Yeah, I don't think he ever slipped from public consciousness.
I don't like Ray Charles.
I figured you didn't.
It's not for me. And I find the excessive shilling of his music and his image. Like, why do we give Ray Charles a pass for being corporate bitch number one in the 80s? And we ostracize so many other quote unquote artists for doing it. It's just, and listen, I'm sure he's a very nice man.
And our cold open, just for context's sake, this was the first of 3 nights that the Godfather saga aired on NBC. So that had just finished as Saturday Night Live was starting. So in the cold open, we have John Belushi playing Don Vito Corleone. Bill Murray is Tom Hagen. And they're lamenting that the Godfather saga was airing on NBC because there's just too much violence on TV. Tom Hagen notes that NBC is preparing a couple of Godfather spin-offs. One, Godfather Knows Best, and the other one, The Courtship of Eddie's Godfather. Vito then decides to send Tom to L.A. to put a bear head in Grizzly Adams' bed. Tom asks about SNL, if he should take any retribution on that to try to get NBC to back off from playing The Godfather further. And Vito says no, his grandkids like the show. There's not enough good satire on TV, and he loves it when they say live from New York at Saturday night. I'm a Godfather fan. This was a timely sketch. I liked both impressions. A couple of dated references, I suppose. But all things considered, I really enjoyed this opening, and I always liked Belushi's Corleone.
I felt like the impressions were well done, but for me, this felt a little forced. Like they had the idea that we have to put something together real quick, and definitely some dated references, which is probably hurting me. But I found this a little draggy and a little, one note. The audience seemed to be digging it more than I did. But this one didn't quite work for me.
It's kind of flat for me, too. First of all, I haven't seen The Godfather. Pitchforks down. I just haven't. I never got around to it. It's long. I was a double VHS in the video store when I was a kid. It's hard for me to just sit there, I think the dated references were kind of lost on me. I wasn't into it. The impression's fine. I haven't seen The Godfather, sure, but I'm not fucking Amish. I know Marlon Brando and the character and the impression, and I've seen a little bit, but I didn't really see any jokes here. Pass.
And I'm about 2 weeks away from my annual viewing of the Godfather. So I think that might show a little bit of where our appreciation lies on that one. We now go to the monologue. Ray Charles is at home base at his piano. He says he didn't want to host the show because it's a tasteless show, but he agreed after the producers of SNL agreed to a few conditions. one of which was that the show would come from Carnegie Hall. And Ray says he knows he's not performing in Carnegie Hall, but the SNL producers don't know that he's not the real Ray Charles. He goes immediately into Johnny Nash's, his version of Johnny Nash's I Can See Clearly Now. I may as well put these two together. I loved this version. I know the song, Johnny Nash's version. I hate the song. But my goodness, the tempo and the excitement on this song from Ray Charles, it matches the lyrics and the tone of the original song far better. I think it's a great way to open the show. Tons of energy. Considering we have a musical host and frankly one who's going to be limited in his performing in the sketches, I thought this was a great way to open the show. This is what we're going to get a lot of from Ray Charles tonight, and I was happy. So we'll stop there before we go into the next little segment, but this worked for me.
Yeah, it worked for me too. I thought Ray's delivery was great. So casual, and I like how, he set it up as though they were playing a trick on him, and then he twisted it around, and how he was dragging on the show with the little shit-eating grin in the corner of his mouth. You could tell he was having a lot of fun. And then, when it kicked into the music, it's not surprising that we're going to get maybe a little more music than normal, having such a musical host. But I thought the song was great. Real high energy, a lot of fun, and a good way to get things rolling.
Of course, I don't like the monologue being a song because it's just not the format. And it's TV, and formats are important. But, when a stand-up comedian hosts, they let him go out there and do stand-up. So why wouldn't you let a musician do music? I accept that argument. I have also made a hash mark on my blind joke count chalkboard of 1.
Ray Charles goes into Georgia on My Mind. And it cuts over to Dan Aykroyd's Jimmy Carter. Carter talks about his energy program, and it's failing because people don't understand how important the energy crisis is. He says he won't be able to balance the budget, and he's probably not going to get reelected in 1980. But a few years later, when someone else is president, they'll come up to Jimmy Carter and ask for help, and he'll say, "Honk off, bozos, you had your chance." We then go back to Ray Charles playing the bit out with a little bit more of Georgia on My Mind. Watching this sketch from this side of history, I can only say that in many ways it's probably the most prophetic sketch that appears in the early Saturday Night Live. I mean, this was not overly funny to me. I didn't laugh a lot, but I was sort of sitting there going, oh yeah, that did happen. Oh yeah, that did happen. That happened too. So for that, it got some points for me. Yeah,
definitely wasn't laughing out loud at this one, but it did seem pretty on point. And there was something kind of amusing about the salty Jimmy Carter just giving it to the American public, because not really a look you see on presidents too often. And yeah, the fact that they got so much of what was going to come right is in hindsight quite entertaining.
I thought this was severely mediocre. Dan does an okay Carter, but you guys just literally fucking both said you didn't laugh. It's a comedy show. It's an established goddamn comedy show. Get it together. It's not some pinko commie rag.
We now go to back to Ray Charles, and he calls out Ella Fitzgerald, played by Garrett. This is a parody of the Is It Live or Is It Mamorex ads that were playing at the time. And Garrett does some scatting, and his high note breaks a wine glass. Garrett then replays it on a Mamorex tape. The wine glass doesn't break, but Ray's glasses do. I don't know how I got familiar with these ads years ago, because they didn't play during my lifetime, but I did see them over the years. So that helped. When I went back and it showed Ray's glasses broken, I got a good laugh out of this. But it was a little long for just the one little joke. Thought Garrett was pretty funny, though.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the ad campaign myself, so this felt pretty clunky. Garrett was putting it on, and Ray was there for it. But yeah, I did fully have a really solid chuckle when I saw Ray's glasses, but outside of that, it seemed like a long walk for a very little joke.
You guys pretty much summed it all up. It was clunky. It was really poorly timed, wretchedly paced. Just for example, when Candice Bergen fucked up, Gilda Radner's recovery that's some shit. That was genius. It's not right to blame Garrett. He's busy doing this fucking wretched drag. This is a horrible mess.
One thing I wanted to mention at the top of the show, too, Ray is the only host who does this without the benefit of any prompting or like cue cards. In Stevie Wonder will host later down the line, but he had an earpiece in. So there is throughout the show some flubbing. I think is purely related to Ray not having his lines down. But compared to most other hosts, we see them reading off the cards. Ray doesn't have that luxury.
I mean, he can fucking read Braille, memorize a fucking script, man.
Yeah, but most don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, most don't memorize their script. They read off the cards.
Well, then maybe you don't have him host the show. How about that? Maybe it's just not a good fit for a blind man who won't memorize his lines to host the show. That's not a fucking crazy idea.
I was going to say maybe they could have snuck in some little Braille cue cards and kept the camera high so you wouldn't see his fingers on them. I don't know, but I think all in all he did pretty good given the situation, but it's definitely a little bit noticeable timing-wise. This skit in particular, but also the tape recorder seemed to be dicking around on Garrett, and then that's like right away he couldn't get that working on time, and it felt like that sent things spinning out a little bit.
That's right, and I'm not saying it's on Ray Charles, but I mean this little clunky production thing happened, and the timing was thrown right off because you can't recover. Fucking Ray Charles is going to be able to follow. He's not going to take, what are you going to stick a line in there? He has a script. He had to memorize it. He's not an actor. Maybe these people shouldn't host, as I like to joke. But it's, what, the proof is in the pudding. This is not fun to watch.
I just want to know what you mean by these people, Matt.
Oh, that's been a recurring joke since Julian Bond. Were you with us for Julian Bond, Mark, or was that someone else?
No, that was Chili. I just listened to the episode, so I had to give a little throwback.
Yeah, because you usually do the here's a non-actor episode.
Yes, yeah. I've gotten a lot of those over the years.
That's by design. We now go to the Doody Girls. It's Debbie Doody and Dottie Doody, the sister and wife of the late Howdy Doody, played by Gilda and Laraine. They are two life-size marionettes who live in Wayne Campbell's basement, it looks like. Debbie is about to start dating again, but she's sad because she doesn't think she's ready. Her date, Bill, comes in as Skip. The sketch ends with the camera pans up and we see three stagehands holding the cradles with the strings that control the marionettes. There was little bits of fun physical comedy here. Laraine was doing this weird thing where she was kind of like walking on her heels. And I did like the little reveal of the crew sort of pretending to be marionette puppeteers. But this was pretty bad. I did not enjoy this at all. And considering how much I liked the previous Debbie Doody, it was kind of a downer, actually.
I actually quite like this one, to be honest. I found they really committed to the physical bit, but I'm a sucker for some goofy comedy. And, for me, it didn't overstay its welcome. It was just about there, and they cut it just at the right time. But I found it pretty fun and pretty goofy. The overacting, Laraine and Gilda, when it's just the two of them on stage, always seem to have like great chemistry, and they know exactly where each other's at. And I thought it was a fun, quick little proper skit with some technical, physical aspects. And the reveal at the end of the crew doing the marionette work was fun.
Well, I guess I'm kind of between you guys because I thought Laraine was amazing as her puppet character. Her physical comedy in this was top notch, easily stole the sketch for me. Bill Murray was an absolute waste of space, however. I didn't get the punch out of the puppeteer reveal that you guys did, but I did really enjoy the zoom in on that man chomping a cigar. And I thought they were, I did keep laughing because I kept laughing when they kept asking what time it was.
Such a stupid joke, huh? Such a stupid joke, but I really liked it.
Yeah, the sketch gets thumbs up from me. I'm on board.
And the aforementioned man with the cigar, it was a Chiron, zoomed in on him and said that he knew Doody personally, which is quite possible, actually. That man had been in television for a number of years, I'd imagine, so he may have known the actual Howdy Doody.
That actually popped in my head when the Chiron popped up. I was like, I bet this is the first Chiron I've seen that's actually true.
It's possible, yeah. There
was that woman that gave good applause. That was
yes.
Yeah, I remember that one too, actually. Yeah.
We now go to Tomorrow, the Tomorrow Show. We have Dan back as Tom Snyder, and he talks about buying a street pretzel, and his stage manager is angry with him. I wrote here after my note, this is pretty much an actual episode of the Tom Snyder Show at this point. The guest is Ray Charles, and Snyder goes into his questions, why singing instead of lawyering or being a watchmaker, and then quite possibly the best line to date on Saturday Night Live. Tom Snyder turns to Ray Charles and says, "What the heck are the blues and who gets them?" Snyder gives Ray a hypothetical question about him being a black sharecropper who shoots his lover and her boyfriend and goes to prison, and wonders if he would wind up getting the blues. He then switches the conversation to being about groupies. Ray says he's sure that Tom, who is a famous man, has some groupies, but Tom says he has none. Tom then starts talking about the miracle worker. He remembers the movie, but he doesn't remember who the movie's about. Helen Keller, of course. And Ray says he didn't see the movie. Ray says his lack of sight has made his other senses much stronger, and he mentions Tom's aftershave, that his tie is polyester and not silk, that he probably still tucks his T-shirt into his underwear, and his hair is about 12 different shades of color. I love this. I laughed through the whole thing. I thought Tom Snyder was bang on. This is closer to Tom Snyder than I ever remember Aykroyd being. And again, questions like what the heck are the blues and who gets them just had me rolling on the couch. I was loving it.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with Tom Snyder, but I have seen a couple of his late night segments, and Dan totally nails the impersonation here. And it just seemed like they were having fun. The little back and forth, all the sort of offbeat, wacky questions that are seemingly in line with a proper Snyder impersonation, and Ray's just kind of deadpan, like smiling through, giving him some real straight answers. When he said I didn't see it, super cheap blind joke, but I laughed. That line, like you mentioned, Keith, great. I really enjoyed this whole thing.
Never a bad time to, and you know what, it's been a bit, so let's rekindle the love for Tom Snyder. What a fantastic show, Keith, he had in the 90s. The Late Late Show with Tom Snyder. I watched that almost every night. I was mystified. There was something so different, and he was just so strange, this strange old man. And that, like, the random chuckles from behind the camera, from the crew, no studio audience, and really zoomed in on his head. It was just...
Matt, before you go on about your thoughts of the sketch, the bit about the pretzel and the bit about like getting screwed out of good studio space and stuff, does that not bring you back to true Tom Snyder though? Like beyond it being funny lines on a comedy?
No, it's remarkable. It really is remarkable. It is magic in a bottle to recapture Tom Snyder like Dan Aykroyd could. I wonder if he could still do it. I'd love to see him do an old Tom Snyder. Maybe like if we give him vodka, is that how it works? I don't know what's up with him now.
I think if we buy it from him, he might.
Or find aliens.
Oh, if you find aliens, he'll do anything for you.
Dan, I have an alien. Come do Tom Snyder.
I'm still hoping season 50 they'll have him in to host.
That would be wonderful. They should do that for something special like that. And you know what? Fuck them a little if they don't. My only complaint with this sketch is I really think Ray Charles is bad at this. He's bad at this. It's because his timing is off, and I find his delivery is just kind of it's not there. It's not a good fit for him, and I don't think he's doing well.
In my belief on this one, you could have put a plant out there. Like Aykroyd was just so good in this one for me.
Exactly. Yeah, he carried it.
We now have a Chiron, and this person actually likes anchovies. And I know people who actually like anchovies, so it's not that strange.
I actually like anchovies.
Do you? Okay, I didn't know you were on. Okay.
Yeah.
Me too. I like anchovies.
Interesting. Okay. I don't. It's one of the few fish I don't like. Our next sketch is What Did I Say? We start at a Memphis rehearsal hall in 1957. Garrett Morris enters wearing one of the greatest wigs and suits that have ever been displayed on network television. And he plays a manager trying to convince Ray Charles to let a white pop group record a version of his song, What I Say. Ray will still record a version for the R&B stations, but this one will play on the more mainstream white stations, and Ray will get a whopping $400. The other 6 SNL cast members come in as a stereotypical white bread singing group. The men are in sweaters that match the girls' dresses, and the girls are in vests that match the guys' plaid pants. I Say, complete with gaggy choreography. I think Dan and Jane in particular are extra hilarious in this one. Garrett as well cracked me up the whole way through. After this, Ray says he still likes his version best, and he does the original version of What I Say. There's a couple things. That's the second time this song appeared on Saturday Night Live. The first time was back in season 1 for the famous Beethoven sketch where Belushi may have actually done coke live on the air. But what really, I laughed through this whole thing, loved the shitty white version of a good black song. What really put it over the top for me were the knowing smiles and laughs coming from the band in the back behind Ray. You could see them like looking at this as if it was like, yep, this is how it was done. But I really enjoyed this. I liked the message as well as everything else. But yeah, this got good marks from me as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too. The cast members coming in and just so overselling the preppy, goofy, over the top, stiff. It was just perfect. Like Jane really stole the show for me. The high pitched voice and the bouncing when she talked, and yeah, the band in the back was just having a blast with it. And yeah, Garrett was so well done up and just like leaning into everything. Felt like everybody was on point with this one. And yeah, I had a really good time with it.
I thought it was too long. It's really long. And I hate that there's so much music. The song wasn't funny. I mean, Jane's funny. But the performances are funny and there's a good energy, but nobody's writing jokes. It's not funny. It doesn't make me laugh because when the cast just is out there bouncing around and smiling, like that just doesn't work for me. I need more.
I did find it a little curious that they decided to do a whole version of like the preppy white kids song and then go into the full Ray version. Like maybe if they had interspersed it somehow to make the contrast more noticeable, or I guess they're expecting everyone to know the song going into it. But like if Ray did his version first and then they did their sad little version afterwards, but then had to get out of the skit, so it makes more sense to have Ray play out. But yeah, doing the whole song, I can see how that wouldn't quite do it for you, Matt. But at the same time, just the look on their faces was what was selling it for me. And I know the song quite well too. So like just seeing how they sucked all the soul out of it and made it this bubbly, goofy, doofusy thing. I don't know. It did work for me, but I can totally see where you're coming from on doing the whole thing and dragging it out a bit.
I honestly think they did the whole thing because they were just having so much fun with it. And it was a tad long, but I did enjoy it. Weekend update. Don Pardo announces Weekend Update with Chevy Chase. Dan and Jane are shocked. That just slipped past me without any issue. And then I went, oh yeah. But he apologized. It's an old script. A few quick sight gags and such. Jimmy Carter, his mother thinks he's growing in the job. And there's a picture of Lillian Carter where her hand is awfully close to the presidential unit. O.J. Simpson had undergone sexual reassignment surgery. Toddlers clashed with the National Guard at the site where there was 7 toddlers had been unjustly spanked. There's a bit about rabies where Jane talks about the symptoms as Dan begins to foam at the mouth. Bill Murray reviews Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Time had printed a review apparently that spoiled the movie, and Bill isn't going to see it now. And Bill basically goes and spoils the movie again for anyone that missed the Time review. It's weird, in a way, Bill Murray talking about Richard Dreyfuss, as there's going to be, those two will eventually have a history together. Burt Reynolds ripped the leg off a dog. I don't remember the context. And then the dancing N taps in. The bulletin says that, to hell with the bulletin, will you dance with me? And they end the segment with Jane and Dan dancing with the dancing N to complete silence from the audience. This was another very weak weekend update. And this time around, it seemed to be less about Dan being awkward, although there was some of that, and more about just the jokes not being there. This is not a good weekend update at all.
Nope, it was not. A half step up from the last one I saw, but when you're starting 6 feet into the bottom of the basement, there's lots of room for moving up, and they didn't move up that much. The only two things I actually laughed at were the two sight gags, the one about Jimmy Carter's mom, because I didn't get what they were going for right away, and then just before they cut away I saw her hand, and so it sort of snuck up on me after the fact. And the Burt Reynolds with the dog picture, because the timing of that picture, it looks like he's like just trying to shake the paw, but there's something about the angle where it looks like he is about to rip that dog's leg off. But outside of that, yeah, clunky timing. The new format is just not good. They're stepping on each other. The whole dancing end part at the end, like, you could see Dan awkwardly trying to steer the person who clearly can't see in the end costume to the front so they could all dance together, and it just wasn't happening. And Jane's clumsily trying to hold it together while trying to shoo them over, and it was bad. I don't know how it's gotten this bad, because it was good at some point, right? Like, I remember this being good. How is it so bad now?
It was great in season 2.
It was great. Jane Curtin was killed it. Chevy had his moments, but Jane Curtin really slammed it in season 2. She slam dunked it, and they messed with success, and for whatever reason, they wanted to fuck around with it and stick other shit in it and get more people in it. And now all of a sudden it doesn't work. Well, what a fucking surprise. Jane still does her best, but she doesn't. It's like a different character. She's playing a weirdly different character. It's a little more serious and not as, I'm at the edge of my rope newswoman she was on season 2. So she's definitely playing a slightly different character. I don't like Dan in this at all. He doesn't seem to like it either, but I know I don't like it either. But the big talking point for me in this is the Bill Murray piece. They keep trying, and it continues to fail. But I do want to really say, Bill is, like, I can tell he's doing his best. And I really think it has potential. This character could be so much better than it is. And I don't like to woulda, shoulda, coulda the show ever, as is our mantra. But I really wish there was better jokes for this character, because I weirdly like the character, but there's nothing there.
Yeah. Is it the character or the catchphrases you like? Because I'm not fond of much of it, but I do have the "get out of here, you knuckleheads" and all that. That sticks with me.
It sticks with me, and I like the character, and I like the concept, but nobody's writing jokes for it.
It's like he's hopping from catchphrase to catchphrase, and everything in between is just rambling. And all he has is the "get out of here, you knuckleheads." And yeah, like you guys were saying, that does stick with you. There's something there, but there's absolutely nothing in between. You can't make a Caesar salad with just croutons. It's a shame, because it feels like there should be something there.
He said, by the way, he scoffed at paying $4 to see a film, and it broke my heart.
Yeah.
Ray Charles now does a medley of some of his old songs with some of his old bandmates. They're together and they do a quick not a quick medley. They do a rather elongated medley, which includes Ray Charles doing a saxophone solo at one point. This is great music done greatly.
It's not fun for me. It's not fun to watch. I don't like the songs. So this is all I'm getting this episode. It's been a pretty rough episode for me indeed. And I didn't enjoy this. I sat through
it. Yeah. When it became obvious this was going to be like a medley and it switched into the second song, I was enthused. I was really enjoying it. This is my kind of music. But immediately, as soon as it switched to that second song, I was like, oh, Matt is hating everything about this right now. I felt bad for you for a minute, because I knew there was going to be more songs crammed in, and based on the runtime of the show, there's going to be more full-on performances later, too. But here we are going to get like 4 songs jammed into one spot in a row. And for the type of show it is, and if you're shooting for a broad appeal, I can see this being too long and maybe being a strange call. When they went through and he gave all of the introductions to, or when all the band members got a chance to do a little thing, that was really good. And seeing Ray play the sax, I've never seen that before, so that was kind of like a fun little, like, oh, look at him go, sweet.
We now go to Franklin Ajayi. He's a stand-up comedian. Do you remember this guy, Mark?
He looked familiar.
Samuel
But-
Fields from Deadwood.
Oh, the general. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yes, I knew he seemed really familiar somehow, but that didn't click. He was so young. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't recognize him, to be perfectly honest. Like when I looked him up, I was like, oh, of course, because he looked familiar, but I didn't nail it. Anyway, always good to see a Deadwooder around somewhere. He did some fun stand-up about Star Trek. A lot of it wasn't super funny. It didn't go over well. I don't know what the popularity level of Star Trek was at this point, other than the reruns had done so well that this was what the brief period of time where it looked like there was going to be a new series, and he mentions that. This probably would have worked better elsewhere. What I've read about his material is he's good in long form.
Yeah, I'm not really a big Star Trek aficionado. I'm familiar with it. Like, I know all the characters and stuff, but his presence I like, but the material was fine. There's a couple of all right jokes in there, but he seemed like he wasn't super into it. And like, even at the very end, when he's like, all right, are we done now? And then he just like clumsily puts the microphone down and starts walking off the stage towards the camera. I don't know. This did not work for me. I wasn't a big fan. And it was funny too, because earlier I was thinking, geez, maybe they should put on a stand-up comedian instead of a musician tonight, because we don't see a whole lot of stand-up outside of the monologues on SNL. From my experience anyway. So I was kind of pumped to get some stand-up, but then he just kind of, it felt one note. And if you aren't a Star Trek fan, that note ain't hitting.
So to that point, like this whole episode is like, if you're not a Ray Charles fan, go fuck yourself. You guys can't give me 5 minutes of Star Trek jokes? Dudes. I love Star Trek. This was good Star Trek material, and it landed with me. I'm sitting through a Ray Charles concert, so I get my Trekkie jokes, and I loved it, and I appreciated the comedy break from tonight's musical performance.
Oh, I'm glad you got this little break, buddy. That's awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, because I get Ray Charles not being for everybody, and this totally wasn't for me. It's good to hear someone enjoyed it, especially someone who wasn't enjoying much else.
We now go to the Evelyn Woodski Slow Reading course, and this is the second reading course offered by the Evelyn Woodski School. It's teaching people who have learned how to speed read how to slow down so they can actually appreciate and understand what they're reading. And we get some testimonials from Garrett, Jane, and Bill. And then we see Ray Charles doing Braille. And he said when he used to read, he used to get blisters on his fingers. This was far better than the other Evelyn Woodski course sketch, but it wasn't that great. Maybe a quick little chuckle.
Yeah, the only thing I laughed at was the getting blisters line from Ray from doing the Braille. It almost weirdly felt like it was either too or not long enough. Like a joke like this where you're dragging things out and making people feel uncomfortable. They either need to cut it in half and just make it be the one quick joke, or draw it out even longer. And you got to push people to the point of being uncomfortable with it so that it becomes funny in that way. But I found like this, just that the pacing was weird, and there's either too much or not enough time sat on it. Like they didn't hit the joke right. So this is a pass for me.
Will they make it? Will the show make 100% of Ray Charles' sketches blind jokes? As of right now, we are tracking yes.
The Tomorrow Show had one?
Yes. Didn't it?
I don't think.
Yeah, that totally had one. When he asked if he saw the movie, the Helen Keller movie, he was like, "Nah, I didn't see it." Just as a quick, like, cheeky one-liner.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that as a blind joke. But anyway, yes,
totally
everywhere. We now go to the ultimate blind joke, I suppose. It's called Blackout, and it starts with Ray Charles talking about Con Edison. He's in a hotel room, and room service calls. Charles opens the door, not remembering that he ordered room service. Garrett and Dan come in as armed robbers. Garrett recognizes Charles. Dan does not. There's a blackout mid-sketch, and in the dark, Charles is able to tie up Garrett and kill Dan. Room service calls. Charles orders his food and asks for the police. I knew where this was going as soon as he was talking about Con Ed. I thought Garrett was pretty funny. I thought Dan was okay. Charles was obviously awkward. All things considered, this wasn't too bad, except for the blackout took way too long. I know that there's shortcuts to do that quicker. And when they come back, Garrett was awkward awkwardly tied up. Could have been done a lot snappier.
The Blackout definitely was way too long. Outside of that, the overall setup and landing of the skit, pretty good. It wasn't bad. And, the idea of Ray Charles, who's not just blind, but, he's not the quickest or youngest fellow in the world, suddenly turning into a ninja and taking these two guys down. Yeah. There's some comedy in that. Like, I kind of tried to mentally picture him flipping over the couch and, stabbing Dan or whatever. It was all right, but the Blackout, really clunky. Like, the execution wasn't great on this one, but it was all right.
Almost like he shouldn't host the show because the production is awful, the timing is awful, there are no jokes, and all they got are fucking blind jokes. No, this is bad. It continues to be bad for me.
We now have a promo, and it's Buck Henry. Always nice to see Buck. He comes out, and he'll be hosting next week with musical guest Leon Redbone. I mean, how did they know I was coming?
Fuck yeah.
I know, eh? And next week, that will feature the 5 finalists for the Anyone Can Host contest. I was sold. I just, I'm good.
Me too. It was the fucking highlight of the show for me, man. I love seeing Buck Henry. He's one of my favorite hosts. Leon Redbone's cool. And I'm excited to see these finalists. I'm sold on next week's show. I'm excited.
Yeah, I popped like a 10-year-old mark when I saw Buck Henry come out. I was pumped to see him. And then he announces next week it's Leon Redbone and all these like goofy hosts coming in from out of nowhere. That sounds like a solid episode. And whoever gets to be the third chair next week, I'm a little jealous.
We now go to Ray Charles again, and he's singing this time, "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." Now, as a one-time student of musical theater, I have heard a billion versions of this because it's from fucking Oklahoma. This is the first one I liked. It's really jazzed up, a great version of what's usually like a tune with the musicality of Happy Birthday to You. So, guilty pleasure for me, seeing a shit song done well.
No surprises here. If you like Ray Charles, you're going to really like this. And I do, so I did. Really jazzed up. And like you said, a song that usually falls real flat. Almost like he's pulling a reverse on what the cast as the White Bread Poppy group did to his song earlier. He's taking this super boring, soulless, musical white person song and flipping it on his head and giving it all this life and jump and pop. And yeah, I thought it was a good time.
I'm done. I'm tapped on the concert. Play me out. Play me out.
He's already dead.
Next up is a quick, not a quick segment. It's a segment where they're standing around the whole cast is standing around the piano, singing "I Can't Stop Loving You," and Belushi does his Ray Charles impression with Ray Charles there. I always thought Belushi had a really good Ray Charles impression until I actually saw him so close to actually seeing the real Ray Charles. Anyway, song ends. Mr. Mike comes in and says he has a surprise for Ray. He's arranged for a painting to be donated to the Lighthouse for the Blind. He reveals it to the audience, Mr. Mike does, and he says it's a Monet painting called The Old Windmill. But the painting is really a bunch of big letters saying, "Please don't tell him." Ray says he's very happy to receive such an award. And Charles thanks everyone who made the week so much fun. Mr. Mike leaves, and Ray says at the after party, he's got about 12 of the biggest black dudes Mr. Mike will have ever seen who are going to break every bone in Mr. Mike's body. I enjoyed this. Mr. Mike is fun. I think this, unlike the discrimination sketch we talked about a little while back, this is how these jokes are supposed to end. Yes, it's another blind joke, but it's extra sinister with Mr. Mike. So, yeah, I enjoyed this. There was a sort of childlike innocence to the cast, just kind of hanging out of character. Yeah, they were just kind of goofing around in some ways. But there was something about this I liked.
This started with such a nice energy, like the cast hanging around the piano with Ray. They were all just beaming. And like, I feel like Belushi's impersonation was a little flatter than I think I've seen him do it otherwise, because he seemed genuinely like nervous or intimidated. They seemed like, they're all rising big stars, but they're standing in front of a living legend, and you could see how like just in awe of him they were, and how pumped they were to be there with him. And that energy was so good to kick things off. And then I really think this is the first time Mr. Mike's I've seen his face on the stage, and I didn't find it that funny. He was going through the whole explanation and maybe just a little burnt out on the blind jokes at this point. But when he was talking the Monet up so much, it was just kind of a little flat for me. And usually I find him hilarious. Like all of the dark, weird things that I've seen him do are really good. But this kind of fell a little flat, although when he walked off stage and Ray did mention, his plans for the after party, it did totally feel like a bit of a redemption arc from that discrimination skit we did where the good guy won. The same thing kind of happening on a different scale, but the good guy won. Yeah. And so like it ended okay, but the whole middle part with the don't tell him painting, I didn't care for that bit.
I always like to see Mr. Mike, so that was a nice little treat. But again, I feel this episode is really void of jokes. There was certainly not a really good one here, and they made it. Everything Ray Charles was in had blind jokes.
We now go to the good nights with only a minute left. Ray thanks everyone, says he had a great time. Totally believe that. He seemed to really enjoy it. The cast and the crew are around the piano. Ray plays everyone out, and for the first time in a while, Dan Aykroyd doesn't run away really quickly. So let's do our ratings tonight. So tonight we'll do rating the host and music together. Ray Charles is a musician, very entertaining one, and quite a storyteller at times, but not really a traditional comic performer. As well, I mean, he was a sightless man in a very non-accommodating 1970s studio on a show where, it's very much about quick changes and people tell stories about running off stage at top speed to try to change in time. So my initial worry about this show was that it was going to be Ray at the piano the whole time for a couple of musical bits, and then he'd be throwing to the cast for just some funny stuff. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much Ray was in on different sketches. So as a host, he was fine considering what the responsibilities of the host are. I thought he did okay. I usually like to see non-actors stray from their norm and do something way out there. I didn't get that, but unlike the Ralph Naders, the Hugh Hefners, the Ron Nessens, I don't know. I found Ray Charles as a person charming enough that it didn't bother me that he didn't go too far. As a musical guest, however, he was excellent. I thought he was far above average. There was far too much music. I mean, objectively, there was far, far too much music in this episode. However, I'm a Ray Charles fan, and the show was written around him and written around his music, and it really worked.
Yeah, musically speaking, I mean, for me, it doesn't get much better than this, right? He's just brings so much life and energy and soul and fantastic, but there was definitely too much of it for the format of the show, for the casual viewer, for the not Ray Charles fans out there. This would have not been a good time, but I was here for it. If they took one song out, I probably would have been okay with that too. And as a host, like you touched on, Keith, he did a lot more than I was expecting him to. He was in quite a few skits. He was bopping from set to set. He had a couple of quick turnarounds, and that must have been real tricky to pull off. He did a really good job, but was it maybe the best choice for the show? I don't know. That's tough.
I mean, of course, I don't think so. I thought he was a miserable host. The timing was off. He wasn't funny. The production was just a mess, and it was just full of music. So if you don't like Ray Charles, this episode is just not for you. And I don't like Ray Charles. It's just not my kind of music. I don't like the Blues Brothers either. I got that to deal with later. I think about that.
What was the worst sketch of the night, fellers?
That Con Ed sketch with the robbers and Ray Charles. It's fucking stupid.
I'll probably say the Woodski Slow Reading one. It was just, I don't know. It seemed like there was an idea there and the execution was just bungled, and the joke itself was draggy. So they either had to overcommit to like drag it even further to make it punch it through to get funny, and they just didn't. So like it just like the slowness. It sucked some life out of me. That was my least favorite.
Funny how things work out. I mean, Matt and I were polar opposites all night, and yet at the end of the day, we can both agree that the Con Ed sketch was probably the worst sketch of the night.
And maybe it was the timing, too. Maybe in a different timing, I agree with Mark if the sketches are rearranged on the show. But whatever, we rate what they give us.
So what was your best for the night, guys?
Debbie Doody. I like Debbie. No, I'm not fucking kidding. I thought it was funny. I thought, again, Bill Murray was a waste of space, but Laraine really made me laugh. And the only time I sincerely just lost myself and laughed this episode was when they kept asking, like, what time is it? I love that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Matt. Like, I'm sure this is a shocker for Keith, but it was the best, like, just sketch. There was hardly any all night, and most of them, they felt more trying to be topical or trying to be whatever. This just felt like a pure sketch with a fun physical premise, and they leaned into it. They sold it. Bill Murray was flat at the end, and he was like, his movements weren't good, but it didn't matter because Gilda and Laraine just crushed it so hard. This was the most fun I had all night.
For me, it was the Tomorrow Show. That should come as no surprise. I just adored that segment. I thought it was both hilarious and the closest to an actual Tom Snyder episode they've gotten yet. Really enjoyed it. Star of the night, fellas.
Well, out of the cast, no one really did a whole lot. I mean, Dan's the only one that comes to mind with his Tom Snyder. His presidential bit at the start wasn't great, but he did it. His Snyder was great. His goofiness and over the topness in the white bread pop cover skit was good. I'm having a hard time, like, Laraine and Gilda killed the Debbie Doody skit, but they weren't really in a lot else that's popping into mind. So I think I have to default give it to Dan just for putting in the most work as a cast member.
Agreed. Dan by default worked his ass off the whole episode. It was really just the only one around. It almost could have been Garrett, but he couldn't pull it off. It was definitely Dan, the workhorse.
And I humbly disagree. I gave it to Garrett. He was given a lot tonight, and some of the sketches were shaky, but he was all in for everything. And I thought he did quite well.
He definitely killed the what I say bit for sure.
For that suit alone.
Yeah. No, he nailed that. I just didn't see enough of him outside of it. The yellow bit was all right. The robber thing, he had a couple lines. Not to say your pick's wrong or anything, but yeah. If there was anyone, if there was anyone else to pick, but outside of Dan, it would be Garrett. And Dan shit the bed in Weekend Update, so you could hold some marks against him for that.
This season, I'm noticing that I kind of am like. He's got to step up at Weekend Update if he wants my votes 45 years later.
I think him and the rest of us would be happier if he just stepped off of Weekend Update, but
yeah. So overall, fellas, this was a very good episode. It had me laughing a lot. And I truly enjoy Ray Charles's music, as I've said 1,000 times. Was this a standard SNL? No, it was not. It was close enough to feel right. It catered to the musical star probably more than any episode since that Paul Simon episode. Also with Ray Charles, and it was similar to last week's Grodin episode, there was a bit of what the hell is going to happen here. And that's a feeling I really like watching these shows. I don't like it to look too polished and too over-rehearsed. So I do like some of the clunk, not in the writing, but in the overall feel of the show. I really enjoyed this one. Not enough to put it in the tippy top, but I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, you stole some words right out of my mouth. The live nature feels a little more exciting when things are always a little like, what is going to go on here? How are they going to get this blind guy 2 stages over in time for this next sketch? But yeah, when the writing's clunky, I got no patience for that because that's the only thing they really have time for going into the live show. But the music was just phenomenal. I love Ray Charles. I thought he was entertaining. I thought there were some really good skits too. So yeah, there was definitely some jank. There were some things that didn't quite work, but overall, I'm with you with a 7.
I mean, if you don't like Ray Charles, you don't like this episode. And I don't like Ray Charles, so I don't like this episode. I liked the Star Trek guy, and there was like 2 funny sketches for me. and a lot of missed opportunity. The writing was lazy. There were blind jokes everywhere. Ray Charles is bad host for me, and I don't like the music. So, I mean, what do I got to work with? The Star Trek stand-up act, which I liked because I like Star Trek a lot, but it wasn't awesome. And Tom Snyder, which Dan Aykroyd just carried on his back, and Ray Charles was bad in it. And the puppets, not really a lot to work with for me. It's a 4 out of 10 for me.
That's higher than I expected, Matt.
Same. I was actually expecting you to say you liked 3 things. You're giving it a 3.
No, I'm looking at some of Matt's 3s from this season. One of his, he only gave 1 3 so far, and it's not that bad. With my 7, Matt's 4, and Mark's 7, we average out at a 6. The Internet Movie Database gave this one a 7.7. This episode, based on the IMDb, finishes 3rd of the year and 105 to date, which, that's closer in line to where I'm at than actually it's also exactly where in line where Matt's at too. This season, other than last week, has not really wowed us yet.
Better start bringing it then.
Yeah, or just have more Charles Grodin coming out.
It definitely feels like they're almost trying too hard to mix it up. I don't know.
Either one or two opposite things at play here. They're either trying too hard or they're like, let's coast.
Yeah, like they're phoning it in and going way too wacky at the same time.
But you know who's not trying too hard and who's not just phoning it in?
Who?
You, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
This was enjoyable. It did somehow feel like a 2-on-1 tonight. But blame Ray Charles's soulful music, I guess.
I'll blame the bookers of the show for doing this to poor Matt. Unkind.
Next week, Matt, it's a holy grail of sorts. I have not watched the episode yet. I mean, other than maybe 20 years ago. I am eager to see how this one goes. Adrian, of course, will be joining us for the musical guest Leon Redbone. And the host with the most, Buck Henry.
Wait.
Matt and I will be back in about a week. But until then, 2 of us will be enjoying some nice R&B blues from a forgotten time. And one of us will be just trying to forget the time here in SNHell.